0 o'clock, and only the BBC in England, and they would play it. We would know when they'd play it. It would be like 9:40. Ringo Starr just turned 85, but his birthday celebration left fans worried. The Beatles drummer broke down crying during his annual Peace and Love moment. He had to cancel shows in Philadelphia and New York after getting sick. 025 doctors told him to rest, but something deeper seemed wrong. For the first time ever, he publicly mourned John and George during his birthday speech. His voice cracked as he spoke. What's really happening to the last surviving Beatle that has everyone so concerned? Richard Starkey was born on July 7th, 1940 at 9 Madryn Street in Liverpool. 049 that summer. German bombs were falling on the city almost every night. His parents tried to stay calm, but everything around them was shaking. And his father, a baker named Richard Starkey Sr., was already starting to drift away. When little Richard was only 3, his father left and never came back. His mother, Elsie, suddenly had to raise him alone. 1:30. She worked all day as a cleaner and then spent her nights as a barmaid just to afford rent and food. In 1944, they were forced to move to a cheaper place because they couldn't keep up with the costs anymore. Then came something even worse. When Richard was 6 years old, his appendix burst. 135 at first. It seemed like just another surgery. But something went very wrong. He caught a life-threatening infection called peritonitis and fell into a coma for days. No one was sure if he would make it. He stayed in the hospital for almost a whole year, far from his mother. And when he finally got out in May 1948, he was 8 years old and couldn't even read or count properly. 201, but he didn't complain. He just kept going. At 13, after he had started getting tutoring to catch up in school, disaster hit again. In 1953, a tuberculosis outbreak swept through his school and Richard got sick. He was sent to a special hospital where he had to stay for 2 years. It was lonely, no friends, no school, just silence. 231, but one day, a nurse gave him a cotton bobbin mallet and told him to hit it against a metal cabinet just for fun. That sound lit something up inside him. A health worker gave him a record called Bedtime for Drums, and he couldn't stop listening. That was the first time he felt like he had something of his own. He grew up in the Dingle neighborhood, one of the hardest parts of Liverpool to 55. It was full of gang fights and danger. Richard ended up joining one just to survive. He saw beatings almost every week. And one day he was attacked so badly by a rival group that it changed the way he saw himself forever. He was already small and quiet. 319. But after that, he felt even more unsure of his place in the world. Music became his escape. It made him feel like he had a reason to keep going. In 1956, when he was 16, he got a job as an apprentice machinist at a factory. There, he met Roy Trafford, who loved skiffle music, a style that mixed jazz, folk, and blues. 343. They practiced in the factory basement with another worker named Eddie Miles and formed a band. In 1957, Richard's stepfather bought him a used drum kit for Christmas. 2 months later, he joined the Eddie Clayton Skiffle Group and played his first real show at the Cavern Club on July 31st, 1957. He worked all day at the factory and played music at night. It was the only thing that gave him real joy. 411 in November 1959. he was asked to join another group, the Hurricanes. They needed a real drum kit, and he had one. They changed their name to Rory Storm and the Hurricanes just before he joined. That's when he started calling himself Ringo Starr. He wore a lot of rings, and Starr made him sound like someone meant to be seen. 4:34, during his solo moments, they called it Star Time, and he sang songs like Boys by 1960. Rory Storm and the Hurricanes were bigger in Liverpool than even the Beatles. Then came Hamburg. In October 1960, they were booked to play in Germany's red light district. The city was wild. George Harrison called it the naughtiest city in the world. 458. And Paul McCartney said every woman there was either a stripper or a prostitute. They played all night, took drugs, drank nonstop, and barely slept. It was chaos. On November 29, 1960, Paul and drummer Pete Best were arrested for setting fire to a condom they used for light in their dark room. 522, they were deported on December 1st. Ringo was surrounded by madness, but somehow he survived. During this time, Ringo recorded with John, Paul, and George for the first time when Pete Best couldn't make it. It was October 15th, 1960, and they backed Lou Walters on a song called Summertime. 546. That was years before the world knew about the Beatles. Later, in 1961, they recorded Cry for a Shadow with Tony Sheridan. While Ringo and his band struggled to get by, they had no steady money. Ringo even thought about moving to America just to find better chances. But something was pulling him toward those three boys from Liverpool. 611 in early 1962. Pete Best kept missing shows. On February 5th, 1962, Ringo filled in again, and George Harrison remembered thinking, this is it. They wanted Ringo full-time, but he was still under contract with the Hurricanes. That one performance didn't seem important to Ringo, but it was the beginning of something huge. On August 16th, 1962, Pete Best was suddenly fired. 6:39 on August 18th, Ringo officially became a Beatle. But the moment wasn't joyful. Fans were furious. On August 19th at the Cavern Club, half the crowd was chanting, Pete forever. Ringo never. George Harrison was headbutted in a hallway and showed up with a black eye. People threw things at the stage. Ringo got death threats. 7:04 for weeks. He was heckled on the streets. He started wondering if this was even worth it. Then came the recording sessions. On September 4th, 1962, he played at Abbey Road for producer George Martin, who wasn't impressed. Just a week later, on September 11th, Martin brought in another drummer, Andy White, and had Ringo play tambourine instead. 7:30, Ringo was humiliated. He thought, they're doing to me what they did to Pete. He thought he was finished. During the 1963 tours, the other Beatles tested him with pranks. They hid his drums, lied about, and created fake emergencies just to see if he could handle the stress. 7:52 at one show in Wales. The entire band had to use someone else's instruments because their gear had mysteriously vanished. It was rough, but Ringo stayed calm. Slowly, he earned their trust. He played drums in a strange way because he was left-handed but used a right-handed kit. That awkward setup made his rhythm sound unique, but he always worried it made him look like a bad drummer. 8:16 he practiced constantly. Scared of being replaced? He even lost sleep over it. But that style became part of the Beatles' sound. It made songs like Love Me Do and Please, Please Me feel different from anything else. On June 3rd, 1964, just before their world tour, Ringo collapsed during a photo shoot. 8:43. His fever hit 102 and doctors diagnosed tonsillitis. The band had to decide whether to cancel their biggest American shows or replace him. They brought in a drummer named Jimmy Nicole. Ringo missed 8 shows in Denmark, Holland, and Australia. George Harrison was so upset he threatened to leave the tour. Ringo didn't want surgery, so he flew to Australia while still sick and rejoined the band on June 15th in Melbourne, 9/13. One illness nearly ended everything they had built when the Beatles landed at JFK on February 7th, 1964. They had no idea what was waiting. 4,000 fans were already screaming before the doors opened. Ringo stepped out, smiling, not realizing he was about to become a magnet for hysteria. His goofy charm made him an instant favorite. But the adoration quickly turned dangerous. 9:43, just 4 months later, on June 13th in San Francisco, a crowd of 500 schoolgirls went wild just to see him during a short airport layover. 5 of them collapsed from hysteria. One of them, 18-year-old Helena Rand, was the head of California's Beatles fan club. She managed to give Ringo a surfer shirt before fainting in his arms. Police had to form human shields to stop him from being crushed on the spot. 10:10. 20 officers barely held the crowd back. Through it all, Ringo kept smiling. He even said, "I enjoy it," but that was just the beginning of what Beatle mania would do to him. While filming A Hard Day's Night in 1964, Ringo's natural wit made him a star on screen. He stole entire scenes without even trying. But behind the charm was exhaustion. 10:38 on June 3rd. Just a day before their world tour, Ringo collapsed during a photo shoot. He had a high fever and was rushed to the hospital with acute tonsillitis. The doctor said he needed rest, but the tour couldn't wait. Jimmy Nicole was paid $2,500 per show to replace him. Ringo thought he was being permanently pushed out. Lying in a hospital bed, he watched someone else sit behind his drums. 11:06, he returned a week later, but the fear never fully left him. In 1965, the Beatles flew to the Bahamas to shoot Help. They thought it would be a lighthearted adventure, but what they walked into felt like a trap. The political climate was tense, and the locals didn't want a British band stealing headlines. John Lennon drank through the entire ordeal. 11:30. He later called the experience humiliating and said the local officials insulted them repeatedly. At one point, he nearly lost it and started yelling back. Security became so tight that the band couldn't move without bodyguards. Ringo, usually the peacemaker, felt the tension rising by the hour. It wasn't fun anymore. 11:54, it felt like survival. By 1966, things had reached a new level. On July 4th and 5th, the Beatles played in Manila. The next more